Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shanty. So we're not going to talk about COVID today. We're not going to talk about COVID for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had a really bad day yesterday and I'm sick of COVID and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But the other reasons are, lately I've been I've gotten a couple of demand letters that have been sent to clients from plaintiffs' lawyers claiming that their client has been wrongfully discharged. Now, these plaintiffs' lawyers don't really mean wrongful discharge in the traditional sense. They mean discharge in violation of one of the civil rights statutes. But they're using the term, and it got me thinking about the concept of at will. And in addition to that, I've had a couple of clients lately say, well, I need to fire this employee, but I don't want to tell them why. Can I just say it's because they're at will employees? So I want to address that issue too. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is this is a rerun. Now it's not a rerun of an old Shanty podcast, but it is a rerun of an article I wrote a couple of years ago called To Be or Not to Be at Will. Should we still be at will even though we have all of these exceptions to the doctrine of at will, the civil rights statutes, the limited public policy exceptions, USERA has an exception to at will in it. The new COVID statute that protects employees when they're out is essentially an exception to at will. There's a number of exceptions to at will, and do we have any value anymore in being at will? Now, the answer to that question, I think, is yes, and I'm going to explain why to you. In order to do that, we're going to go visit with Claudius, the evil plant manager, while she has a meeting with Hamlet, the HR director, about firing Gertrude. Now, Gertrude is a 64-year-old female plant supervisor with a bad knee who's not from Denmark. So let's go visit with them for a second and see what they have to say about getting rid of Gertrude. And you're getting the shirt now, aren't you?
Hamlet, time to fire Gertrude.
Forsooth, noble Claudius. Why?
What do you mean, why? She's an at-will employee. I don't need a why.
Noble Claudius, not true, for Gertrude is a member of at least 4 protected categories.
Well then, why perchance do we even bother with all this at-will stuff, forsooth?
I don't know about you, but I think that was a masterpiece of Shakespearean theater. And the Law Shanty players, for those of you that want to know, are Victoria and Daniel, 2 of my 3 children. Thank you very much. And this is Jeffrey, which I think, yes, I know. Jeffrey belongs to my daughter, and it's super weird that my daughter named a toy skull, but we're not going to get into the weirdness of my family. We've got other things to talk about. So let's talk about those other things. We're going to talk about really 2 primary issues associated with the concept of at-will employee. And the first of those issues is the one that Claudius brought up when she was talking to Hamlet. Gertrude is an at-will employee. Why can't I just tell Gertrude when I fire her, I'm firing you because you're an at-will employee? And we got to start with this proposition. There's nothing in the law that requires you to tell an employee why you're firing them. It's not required. But you really need to tell an employee why you're firing them, because if you don't, they're going to make a reason up. No employee thinks they're a bad employee. I mean, there's some self-aware employees that might, but for the most part, they don't. They don't think they're a bad employee. They don't think they're doing a bad job. And if they get fired and you don't give them a reason, they'll find a reason. And in Gertrude's case, that reason is going to be because she's a female, or because she's 64, or because she's got a bad knee, or maybe because she's not Danish. And you'll notice that all of those are protected categories. So we've gone from Gertrude, you're a bad employee, to Gertrude now thinking, they must have fired me because I'm not Danish. And we all know Hamlet can't stand people that aren't Danish. So we want to give employees a reason when we let them go. And it's not good enough, in my opinion, to just say, hey, we're letting you go because you're an at-will employee. You have a reason why you're firing that employee. Nobody fires employees without reason. It's silly. It's costly. And in this day and age, you can't afford to let employees go. Even marginal employees, maybe you can't afford to let go. So you need to give the employee a reason. Now, you're walking a fine line here. We want to tell the employee why they were fired generally. You were fired for violating handbook policy number, blah, 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 among other things. Now, why do I say among other things? We don't want to be too specific because you don't want to box yourself into a corner in the event that we do get sued. When we get sued, we want to tell the jury every single thing this employee ever did bad that led to them getting fired. So don't box yourself in a corner. You also don't want to tell the employee something different. You need to tell the truth. You don't say we're eliminating your job if you're not eliminating the job, because if we get sued, you're going to want to tell the jury the real reason why you fired the employee. And if you told the employee one thing and you tell the jury another thing, you don't have any credibility. The jury thinks, well, if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? Maybe they really did fire this employee because she's not Danish. So when we sit down with an employee to let them go, the fact that they're at will is great. And we want them to be at will so that we're not dealing with a just cause issue. But we don't want to use that as the excuse for firing the employee. We want to have a reason, a legitimate reason, why we're firing the employee. Now, the other reason why you want to be an at-will employer is this issue of just cause. There are a gazillion exceptions to the at-will doctrine now. The civil rights statutes are exceptions. The ADA, I listed some of them at the beginning. There's a bunch of them. But if an employee is a just cause employee, when we fire an employee for smoking in the restroom, if they're a just cause employee and we don't have a really good definition of what just cause is in a handbook or a contract or something like that, we've got to convince the jury that the reason that we fired the employee was, quote unquote, just cause. It was cause. All right? So that's an extra step that we have to take. Most employees are going to claim that they were fired for a violation of one of the civil rights statutes now, because that's the easiest thing to claim. And almost everybody's in a protected category. When an employee claims that they were fired for violation of one of the civil rights statutes, what we need to show the jury is no, they weren't fired for violation of one of the civil rights statutes. They were fired for a legitimate non-discriminatory reason. That we had a legitimate reason for firing them. They were smoking in the restroom, and that wasn't discriminatory. We fire everybody that smokes in the restroom. We don't have to prove that smoking in the restroom is cause. All we have to prove is that's the reason that we don't. All we have to show is that's the reason the employee was fired. So you want to be an at-will employer. And a lot of times it will help get you to a summary judgment. So even though there's all these exceptions, even though all of this stuff exists, you still want to be an at-will employer. So we're going to close with this. How do you make sure that you're an at-will employer? Well, the first thing you do is you don't enter into a contract that says just cause. But Steve, what about my progressive disciplinary system in my handbook? Isn't that just cause? It can be, but it's not if you say in your handbook, we're an at-will employer, which means you can be fired for any reason or no reason. And by the same token, you can quit for any reason or no reason. So there's three primary places that I want you to go look and make sure that you've got some nice at-will language in there. Number one, your job application, and don't bury it in the fine print. Have it out there. Maybe have the employee initial it when they do their job application. Go over it with them when you go through the job application. Have some at-will language in your job application. The second place you want to have it is in your handbook. But not just in your handbook. Have it in the handbook acknowledgement page too. So that when the employee signs the acknowledgement, they're acknowledging, in fact, yes, I know I'm an at-will employee, and that I can quit whenever I want, or I can be fired whenever I want. And the third place you want to have it is if you have any standalone documents with an employee, confidentiality agreements, intellectual property agreements, covenants not to compete, anything like that. You want to make sure that you've got language in there that says nothing in this agreement means that you aren't at will. You're still at will. And those are really the three primary places where you want to have this language. Believe it or not, despite all of the exceptions, it's still important for you to be an at-will employer. Now, if you don't want to be an at-will employer, that's fine. But remember, if you're not an at-will employer, that puts an additional burden on you to prove when you fire an employee that you actually had just cause to fire that employee. I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time, and I promise no poofy shirts.